2.5 is going to be pretty much all review for you from Algebra 1. This is a really important skill, though, is to solve systems using algebra. Okay, almost always on standardized tests, there is something that's going to ask you to solve a system of equations, and it's usually something we need some extra practice in. So you may recall the name of these methods: substitution and elimination. So we're going to go over both of those today. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is solving equations using substitution. When you do that, you're going to solve for one variable and at least one equation if necessary. Okay, so you're going to solve for one variable and at least one equation. Now, when you do that, if you can, this doesn't always happen, but if it does, you want to look for a coefficient of 1 or -1 if possible. Sometimes there might not be that and you're just going to have to decide. But generally, when you use substitution, it's beneficial when you have the 1 and the -1. Okay, because if you don't have 1 and -1, a lot of times we go to elimination. Okay, so once you solve for one variable, you're going to substitute the expression into the other equation. So you're going to get an expression, and that's what you substitute into the other equation. Then you're going to solve that equation, and that's going to give you the first variable. And then we get to substitute again into one of the original equations, and that's going to let you solve for the second variable. Okay, and then you are going to write those as an ordered pair, x, y, and you can always check. Okay, so you can always check to make sure x and y satisfy both of those equations. Okay, I'm not going to make you like write out checks like we did in our earlier section, because you won't have any extraneous solutions. You just want to check to see if you did it correctly. So make sure you're paying attention to the directions. These directions are asking you to use substitution. By the end of the notes, we'll have multiple methods, so you just have to pay attention to which method they ask you to use. So your first step is to find a coefficient of 1 or -1 if it's available, and solve for x and y. Technically, you can solve any equation you want for any variable that you want. It's just it's a little bit easier if you choose one with a coefficient of 1 or -1. So if we look at the second equation, what has a coefficient of 1? X. So it's going to be really simple to solve for x. And you can either write this as 3 plus y or y plus 3. And then you can take that equation and plug it into the other equation. So we use this equation in step 1, which means in step 2, we're going to use the 3x plus 2y equals 4. Okay, and now that we have that, we can substitute. If x is equal to y plus 3, instead of x, we're plugging in y plus 3. All right, so then we distribute. So we have 3y plus 9 plus 2y equals 4. Okay, go ahead and solve that for y. So get all your y's together, get all your numbers together. Okay, you can use your calculators today, but I think you're going to find doing it without them is actually quicker. Okay, so you're going to subtract the 9, divide by 5, What is negative 5 divided by 5? Negative 1. Okay, so when you have done that step, that's step 3. We solved the equation to get the first variable. So now we're going to substitute that value into one of our original equations. So it doesn't matter which original equation you substitute it into. In fact, I usually substitute it into this equation from step 1 because it's x equals, and so if I just plug this in, all I have to do is the negative 1 plus 3. Okay, so there's more than one way that you could get the correct answer. Now, when you write your answer, remember that you are going to write it as an ordered pair. So the x always goes first, the y always goes second. So your final answer is 2, negative 1. Okay, so for part B, I want you to pick an equation and then solve for that variable. All right, so I would choose to solve for the variable that has a coefficient of 1 or negative 1, which means I would be solving the first equation for y. Now, because it's negative, I'm just going to add y to the other side. I'm going to subtract 3. So I have 4x minus 3 is equal to y. It's okay that it's on this side. Okay, and then your next step is we're going to plug in y to the second equation. So I have 8x minus 2y equals 7. So you're always plugging it into the other equation. So I'm going to, instead of y, I'm going to plug in 4x minus 3. I'm going to make sure I distribute. So I have 8x minus 2 times 4 is 8. Negative times a negative is a positive. And then, yeah, something special happens here. So if you have 8x minus 8x, that's just 0. So on this side, you're left with 6. You have 6 equal to 7. Okay, so when this happens, you just have to ask yourself, is this a true statement or a false statement? It is obviously what? It is obviously false. When it is false, put the x through the equal sign. Do you guys think you know what that means we're going to write for our solution? No, solution is correct. Okay, if it was true, do you guys know what you'd write? No, because how many solutions? Infinitely many. Good. So remember we talked about that yesterday, infinitely many solutions. So if this was a true statement, that's what you'd have. Because it's a false statement, you are going to write no solution. Okay, that is your final answer. Okay, and now we're going to apply this to real world problems. We're going to extend that. So Latoya makes a total of 52 bracelets and necklaces to sell at a craft fair. Okay, and then it says each bracelet takes 8 minutes to make. So the bracelet takes 8 minutes. The necklace takes 11 minutes. And she spends exactly 7 hours and 44 minutes making the jewelry. Okay, what they're asking you to do is write a system of equations. So you're going to write a system, and you are going to solve using substitution. Okay, so in the story problem, they're going to give you 2 sets of quantities. Okay, so if you are writing a system, you have to see what they give you. So they tell you there's a total of 52 bracelets and necklaces. Okay, so if there's a total, they're giving you the number of bracelets and necklaces, one of our equations is going to be about that. What else do they quantify? What else do they talk about? Okay, yep, so they also talk about the time spent to make them. Okay, so we're going to come up with two equations. We're going to start by defining our variables. So let's say that B is the number of bracelets. And we'll make N the number of necklaces. And when you're writing a system, generally you'll have like a little fancy bracket and you'll write each equation in there. Okay, so we know that the total number of bracelets is 52. So that means the number of bracelets B plus the number of necklaces N is equal to a total of 52. That's the total amount of bracelets and necklaces that she made. Now the time information, they told us it was 8 minutes per bracelet. They told us it was 11 minutes per necklace. And that the total time was 7 hours and 44 minutes. So we have the 8 minutes per bracelet, the 11 minutes per necklace. The total time is 7 hours and 44 minutes. So we want to make this into an equation as well, but we have to make sure that we use the same units. What isn't the same right now? Yeah, this one has hours in it, so we're going to just convert that to minutes, so everything is in the same unit. So how do we do that? So just do 7 times 60, because that will give you the exact minutes, right? And then, yep, and then plus 44, and that will give you 464 minutes. Okay, so then our equation has to have the rate with it. So it'll be 8B, because 8 minutes per bracelet, plus 11 minutes per necklace, equals a total of 464 minutes. Okay, now when you do this for practice, we do have coefficients of 1, so you can choose. Even if you don't have coefficients of 1, you can choose. It just means you're going to have to do an extra step to solve. Pay attention up here. Okay, so you guys can pick. Should we solve for the B or should we solve for the N? It honestly does not matter. Okay, so if we solve for the N, then what would we do with the B? Yep, subtract both sides. Okay, so then we have 52 minus B. That's what we're going to plug in. Okay, so it's 8B plus 11N, so we're going to substitute that in, equals 464. Okay, and you can use your calculator to help you with that today. Okay, so I want you to go ahead and solve that equation for B. And then use substitution to find the N value. Okay, so what do we get for B? Good. All right, and then once you find B, remember I said you can either plug this into one of these equations, or in step 1, this is already solved. So if you want, you can just plug in 36. Okay, so when you have a story problem, that's the only time where you're not going to have to write your answer as a coordinate point, because you can see here they're going to ask you to describe the situation. So describe what the solution represents in terms of this situation. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, and then notice they also ask you how many of each type of jewelry did LaToya make? And then they also are asking how many minutes did she spend making them? Okay, so we're going to include those in our answer. All right, so the first thing we can say is LaToya made 16 necklaces. And 36 bracelets. Okay, so that is going to answer how many of each type. Also describe the situation. Okay, and then how can I figure out how many minutes she spent making the necklaces? You can, or you can just do what? We know that each necklace took what? Yep, each necklace took 11 minutes, so 16 necklaces times 11 minutes is going to give you the total number of minutes. So when you multiply 16 by 11, you get 176 minutes. We are going to include that in our answer, but if you're like me, 176 minutes doesn't mean a lot to you. It's the same thing like when somebody tells me the weather in Celsius, right? Like, I don't know, I got to convert it. So generally, when the minutes are this high, we convert it to what? Hours. So we're also going to do that and include that in our response, since in a real world situation, that's going to be more practical. Okay? So she spent 176 minutes. And how can I figure out what that is in hours? That you can just take it and divide by 60. Because remember before we multiplied by 60? Okay, so that's about how many hours? 3. Oh, you absolutely could. Actually, later this year, I think we have some sort of problems where I have you do that. Okay, so she spent 176 minutes. That's approximately 3 hours. Oops, I wanted to say she spent that much time making, that's how much she spent making the necklaces. Okay, and 288 minutes. We'll convert that. Making the bracelets. Okay, so if we take 288 and divide that by 60, it's approximately how many hours? And then if you guys wanted to convert it into hours and minutes, you know how you do it? Well, the big number is the hours, right? So before hours, how can you convert 0.8 into minutes? Yeah. So it'd be 4 hours and 48 minutes. Okay, and then for this one, you just subtract that big number, the whole number. Multiply that by 60. It'll be 56 minutes. It's just the decimal, it's just the rounded. All right, and now we're going to learn how to solve equations using elimination. Well, relearn, I guess. Okay, because when you're solving using elimination, okay, this is where you want to cancel out one of the variables or eliminate. Okay, and when you do that, you should make sure that in the system, the like terms are aligned. A lot of times that's already done for us. And it tells you to eliminate one of the variables. And then you're going to solve for the other variable. But it doesn't tell you how you're going to eliminate. Do you guys remember what you do to eliminate? Because, yeah, when do things cancel out? When you have what? Yep, when they're opposite. So if you had, if they were on each side of the equation, they would be equal on both sides. Because you have two equations, okay, they'll be opposites, but they're not always gonna just be given to you that way. So what you can do is you can multiply equations to get opposites. So opposites are the same number but different signs. And after you get the opposites, then you have to add your equations. Okay, so you multiply to get your opposite, and then you're going to add them. Okay, and then after you do that, you're going to substitute the value of the variable into one of the original equations and solve for the other variable. And then lastly, you are going to write those as an ordered pair. Okay, and again, you can always check that. Okay, so for A, you already have opposites. Which are the opposites, the X's or the Y's? And you have the X, the Y's, and the numbers already lined up, so we're just going to add those together. Okay, so can you add those straight down? Okay, so when you add straight down, you get the 3y and the 5y is 8y. 7 plus 1 is 8. To get y by itself, we divide by 8. And we get y equals 1. So now we substitute that value into one of the original equations. Does not matter which one. Okay, so you can choose whichever one. I usually pick the one that has less negatives. Okay, so if y is 1, I'm going to plug that in. I have 2x equals negative 4 divided by 2. X is going to be negative 2. Okay, so then your final answer is written as a point. So your solution is negative 2, 1. Okay? Now, I'm going to write out the check for you so that you can see what you would plug in. You do not have to write out the check on your homework. This is something that you can do using mental math. I just want you to have it for here so you can see what the check is. Remember that before, when we were doing the check, we were doing that because you could have an extraneous solution. For these, you aren't going to have an extraneous solution. You're just making sure that it works in each equation. So in the first equation, I'm going to plug in -2 for x. I'm going to plug in 1 for y. And I'm going to see if these are equal. So a negative times a negative is a positive. 4 plus 3 is 7. Yes, it is. Okay, and then it has to work for both equations. So this is the first equation. Let's check it in the second. So this is equation 1. We'll check it in equation 2. So 2 times x plus 5 times y equals 1. Okay, so 2 times -2 is -4. Is -4 plus 5 1? Yes, it is. Okay, so I said you can do this mentally. You can do this using mental math. Okay, you do not have to write that out. I just want you to understand that you can plug it back in and you can check. So if you're doing a test or a quiz, you know if you got it right or not. Okay? All right. For part B, we're going to eliminate the x's. So we just want them to be opposite. If this is -6, okay, the opposite of -6 is? Oh, yes, that would be awesome. Thank you so much. Little childhood treat. I love it. Thank you. Eat it slowly. All right, let's multiply by 2. Did you guys ever visit the ice cream truck growing up? Oh, I feel like I heard them this summer. Okay, so 6x minus 12y equals 20. And then here, you guys may have already noticed something interesting is going to happen. Okay, so here when you add them, 6 minus 6 is 0, right? -12 plus 12 is 0. So we need to write 0 on this side. Okay, don't just write nothing. Okay, make sure you write 0 here, and then 20 minus 20 is 0. So just like we did before, all we have to ask ourselves is this true or false? It is true. So if it is true, your solution is infinitely many solutions. Okay, so then for C, I want you to choose if you want to get rid of the A's or the B's. And then once you make that choice, multiply to make it happen. So you choose whether you're going to eliminate the A's or the B's. Yes. Alright, so whether you chose to eliminate the A's or the B's, you multiply by -2. So you multiply the top equation by -2, and you got negative 6a minus 10b equals 4. And then this is going to stay. And then again, something special happened. When these all cancel out, you write 0. You have 0 equals 5. That is not true. That is false. So you're going to write no solution. Okay, and then for D, again, you have a choice of what you want to eliminate, the M's or the N. If I were doing this, because you have the negative and the positive here, I would probably choose to do the N's. If you choose to do the M's, you notice how they're both negative? Okay, if they're opposite, we want one to be positive. So you're going to have to multiply one by a negative value and one by a positive value. Okay, what we want to do is we want to get opposites, and the simplest way to do that is to find the LCD, okay, or the LCM, the least common multiple. So between 4 and 10, what's the lowest number they both multiply to? They both multiply to 20. So if we choose to multiply the top by negative 5, and you have to show me what you're multiplying by. I'm not going to know what you're doing unless you show me what you're doing. Okay, so this is going to be 20m plus 20n, bless you. And then 10 and 5 is 50. This is 20, so this would be negative 70. So if this is positive 20, I want this to be negative 20, and I can multiply by just 2. Then I have a negative 20. If you forget to do that, then you actually double the value instead of cancel it out. So that's just where you want to be careful. Okay, so then when you add straight down, you get 24n equals negative 120. We're going to divide both sides by 24. Notice that you should get a negative when you're dividing a negative by a positive. You can calculate that. Good. Yep, negative 5. Okay, and then you can plug this into either equation that you want. Okay, so if you plug it into the first one, it's negative 4m minus 2 times negative 5 equals 14. A negative times a negative is a positive. And move over the 10. We're going to divide. And then remember, the only time you don't write it as a coordinate point is if it's a story problem. So when you're writing these as a coordinate point, if it's not x and y, it just always goes in alphabetical order. Okay, so the m is going to go first, n is going to go second. That is your final answer. Okay, so your answers today are either going to be one solution, infinitely many, or no solution. So if you have one solution, you are going to have an ordered pair. Okay, the ordered pair is x, y, or whatever is in alphabetical order. The infinitely many solutions, that's going to happen when you have a true equation, and the no solution is when you have a false equation. Okay, so the true equation, some examples would be if you have 0 equals 0. Sometimes I'll put like a little check. Or 5 equals 5. Those would be true. For false equations, you might have something like 0 is equal to 5 or 2 is equal to 7. Those are both false. All right, so I'm going to have you guys start on your homework.